Hey everyone! Welcome to a special Deaver Farm Explorer segment on transplanting. So we wanted to check in and make sure that everyone is keeping track of their seedlings that we planted the first week that we were together. We planted bean seeds, but maybe some of you planted something else. So if you've been keeping track of your seed, making sure it's watered, making sure it gets enough sunlight as soon as it germinated, right? Then the next thing that you should be ready to do is transplant. So that means taking it out of your house. We take it out of our greenhouse. Wherever you've been letting that seedling mature, the next thing you're going to want to do is put it outside into the garden, into whatever container you're using to grow your plant. So that could be a pot, it could be a garden bed, it could be in the ground somewhere if you have ground to grow in. So today we just wanted to show you how we do transplanting here at the farm and maybe catch up with how some of you are taking care of your seedlings at home. Doing a great job with your seedlings so far. So when we're ready to transplant these little baby plants out into the world, out into whatever container they're going to grow into, the first thing we like to do is make sure that they're nice and well watered. So in our trays here, our seedlings have gotten so big, we like to water the whole tray, make sure they're nice and moist, because otherwise when you go to pick up the plant, if the soil around it is dry, it will kind of fall away. And what you want to do when you're transplanting is make sure that it's all together. The root system is all together so that we're not disturbing it as we take it from one container to another. So maybe your seedlings are in that recycled yogurt container, maybe they're in a paper pot, whatever you chose to grow your seedlings in, maybe you grew it in this eggshell. Here's our eggshell seedling that's doing really well. And they might be at different stages of growth. They might not be this big, they might be a little bit smaller, but you want to make sure that it's big enough so that when it's ready to go into the ground, it has a bit of a root structure to establish itself in the ground. So as long as your seedling is about 2 to 3 inches tall, you want to make sure that you see that second set of leaves. They're called true leaves. We saw the cotyledons, remember? Those were the first leaves that come out. They looked a little bit different than the leaves we're looking at next. So these are the true leaves. Also, if you're just tuning in for the first time, don't worry, you can still start seeds up through the end of June. If you're going to grow beans, or there's a lot of other things that you can grow later on in the season. So make sure you check back at that first handout we had. It'll tell you about all the different things that you can grow throughout the summer, so you can start at any time. So now that we have our tray of seedlings or whatever container all watered and ready to go, we're going to very gently take them out and see how they're looking with their roots. So I'll take this one here. And in these trays, we like to make sure that we are squeezing the bottom a little bit to kind of loosen up the bottom of the plant, and we're gently grabbing the base of the plant. So not the leaves, because we don't want them to rip off. We're going to grab the base of the plant like this. So at the same time, I'm squeezing a little bit and I'm lifting up. And what do we have? A beautiful little seedling. So just like we saw in this past week's episode, we have our root system growing at the bottom of this plant. We have the stem that's looking nice and sturdy and tall. These true leaves have formed. This plant looks like it's ready to go in the ground, right? So when we transplant, it's going to be a lot like the way that we planted seeds. We're going to make a little space in the soil with our hand. We're going to plop the little seedling in the hole. We're going to tuck it in and say good luck. And then we're going to give it some water. So let's see how we do this here at the farm. Here we have our raised beds, and something very important that we have to do before we are ready to transplant on the farm is that we have to prep the soil. So sometimes if we haven't planted anything for a while, the soil gets a little packed down. So we want to make sure that it's nice and aerated so that there's air coming through it so that the plants don't just get stuck when we try to transplant them into the bed. So what we've done with this bed so far is we've aerated, so we used a pitchfork and just moved the soil a little bit to get some air in it, and then we raked it all out nice and even with a rake so that we had a nice smooth surface to plant into. Let's see how we did that the other day. So now you've seen how we transplant at the farm into our big raised beds. But maybe at home you have your seedling, maybe you've grown it in an eggshell like we have here, or maybe you have it in a different container that you can then take out, have your little root ball attached to the rest of the plant, and you'll be ready to put it into a container. So maybe you have a pot that looks something like this. We have this pot that we can carry around the farm. We have our seedling. The cool thing about this eggshell is that we don't have to take the seedling out. We can just leave it right in this eggshell because it's biodegradable, right? We use eggshells in our compost. We'll talk more about that in our compost lesson, but this is something that will break down in the soil so you don't have to take the seedling out. So this is looking like it's ready to be planted, right? So same thing as we did when we were planting seeds. Take your finger, make a little hole the size of how big your seedling is in the center of the pot. So for this green bean plant, I'm only putting one in this pot because like we said before, each plant needs a little bit of space. So if I put 2 green bean plants in this pot, they might get a little too overcrowded and one might get more sunlight than the other. So I'm just gonna put 1 plant in this pot. Same thing goes for if you're growing tomatoes, something that's bigger, you're gonna wanna just put 1 seed in a pot. If I was growing a green, like an arugula, that spicy green we saw last week, or a lettuce mix or something that can be closer together, I would put a whole bunch of little seedlings in here and then they would just grow right next to each other. But for this green bean plant, we're gonna transplant this right in the center. So I'm taking my egg, dropping it right in the hole. You can see. And then I'm gonna tuck it in and I'm gonna make sure that I'm not burying any of the leaves. And really, I'm not burying any of the stem either. So I'm making sure that it's nice and level with the top of the soil. So I'm gonna tuck it in. I'm gonna say, good luck, little seedling. And then I'll show you. You also wanna make sure that your soil has some nutrients in it, right, for the roots to find. So what you can do is add compost. We're gonna learn all about how compost is made and how we use it here on the farm with our next lesson. But for now, if you can find a source of compost, either from a community compost or from your local garden center, you add that into your soil and make sure, sometimes you can get a mix, because you wanna make sure that there's nutrients for that baby plant to grow. They're gonna need to suck those up from the soil and use it to start their growth. So you've got your soil with the compost mixed in, you've got your seedlings ready to be planted. So after you're all finished transplanting, the next thing you're going to want to do is, first, very important, say good luck, little seedling. And the next thing you're going to want to do is water it. Alright, great job everybody. We've got our seedlings transplanted, we've got them all watered in, we wished them good luck, and they're on their way, right? So make sure you're following along with our little green bean plants, and please feel free to show us whatever you're growing. You can send pictures and videos or drawings to the email address that's in our lesson info handout, and we look forward to seeing how your plant journeys go. So that's all for this week. We'll see you next time when we're talking all about soil and compost. See you then!